Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, what's going on today? How are you?
I am doing well, Bryce. It is a beautiful sunny day. I'm looking out the window at blue sky, just gorgeous.
We won't talk about what the temperature is, but it
No,
looks nice outside, and that's the most important thing.
it does. It looks, when the snow is kind of on the trees, it looks like a holiday card. I don't know which holiday, but one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. So yeah, today's going to be actually a really fun episode. It's going to be really interesting because it's kind of it's a bit of like a two-parter. I want to say
it's an
we've been really
episode a year in the making.
It literally is, yeah. So, like, we have obviously, as you can see, probably from the description of today's episode, we do have an interview with Tanya Talaga, who we are bringing here. We're not bringing her here. She will be doing a virtual event with us on March 10th. And it's funny because Caroline and I actually recorded this interview like last March, and it was like, I was looking at the timestamp on it, Caroline,
Yeah.
when I was just kind of editing the audio, and it looks like it was done on like, I don't know, March 2nd or 3rd. So we were like a week and a half away from just complete everything. Like we knew about we knew about COVID-19 at this point, but I think we were all kind of in denial. Like, yeah, there's maybe a case here or there, but it won't really be, maybe hopefully it wasn't going to be that big of a thing here, but we were totally wrong.
And I don't know if you remember this, Bryce, but the day that we recorded, it was the day of BTS, their first appearance in March Madness. So we went in, we were at a recording studio and we went in and like your phone was blowing up with like messages from the rest of the marketing team, like telling you how much traffic that tweet was getting.
Yeah, it was insane. It was like, I think at the time, it's since changed, but I think at the time it ended up being one of our like best, like our biggest tweet ever.
Yeah.
Anyway, the BTS crew got behind it, and yeah, it propelled them to easy victory there in that first round of March Madness last year. So yeah, it's weird how much stuff has obviously changed since we did record that interview with Tanya Talaga. And with that too, of course, is just in general the forward thinking speaker series itself. So obviously, Caroline, last episode we had the pleasure of chatting with Irshad Manji, and hopefully everybody did enjoy that episode. But really, like that, the event coming up, it'll be when you hear this next Thursday with Irshad. It's been over a year since we've actually done a forward thinking speaker series event. And that's kind of also what we're going to be chatting all about today, right?
Absolutely. And we're so happy to have a guest with us to go along with the interview that we did a year ago.
Yeah. So Caroline, I feel like I have to be on my best behavior today. Not that I'm not normally on my best behavior when we record these, but we have my boss joining us today, our director of marketing, communications, and fund development here at EPL, Anna Alfonso. Welcome to the show, Anna. How are you today?
Hey, Bryce and Caroline. I'm doing good, having a cozy day because of the weather, but thank you for having me.
Before we get to that interview with Tanya Talaga, we're going to be chatting about the Forward Thinking Speaker Series itself. Kind of what happened kind of with the delay this year with everything that's been postponed because of the pandemic, and kind of what the series looks like here moving forward. But before we get started, I think, Caroline, we should maybe share a listener email that we received after our It's Not on Netflix episode.
Absolutely. This email came in, Bryce, and you were so excited. You shared it with me right away. I think it's one of your favorite emails that we've gotten. Definitely one of mine too.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share it right now. It's from one of our coworkers here at EPL. Her name is Tammy. So the email starts off with, "This is Tammy. I'm a fellow EPLer. I'm at home right now listening to your and Caroline's It's Not on Netflix episode, and I had to stop to send you this email to say yes, Van Halen forever. You rock, Bryce. Have a great day. And then she also mentions she has her hands in the air doing the rock signal. So Tammy, of course, is referencing how I had recommended The Best of Van Halen in that it's not on Netflix episodes. So I kind of poke fun of my dad rock recommendations on the show a lot. So it's kind of nice to hear that a listener to the show and a coworker of ours, Caroline, enjoyed my recommendation of Van Halen.
Absolutely. And we just want to thank Tammy for reaching out. I've worked with Tammy and been at trainings and things with her in the past, and she's just absolutely lovely. And thank you for reaching out and letting Bryce know he's not alone.
I appreciate that feedback. I really do. We always appreciate feedback from our listeners. So yeah, if there's something that you love that we've recommended, or maybe you're like Bryce, you're out to lunch on that pick, shoot us an email at podcast@epl.ca, and Caroline and I get those all the time. So before we get started today, let's share some of our own overdue finds that we've been enjoying since our last episode. Anna, it's your first time on the show. What's something that you've been enjoying lately?
Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I was captivated by this audiobook. The story takes place in the 70s, and it is about the whirlwind rise of a rock and roll band. It has glamour, it has scandal, it has heartbreak. And the strong female characters in the book have really stayed with me, and a really great cast of voice talent too. So highly recommend that one.
Now, Caroline, is that a book you also recommended on the show? I think it was like last year, maybe, when it first came out.
I have. I was a big fan of this book, and I read it in print copy, and I've heard fantastic things about the audiobook. Now, the book itself is written kind of like transcript style, as if we're watching a documentary or listening to a recording. Does it have like a full cast where each character is played by someone else?
It does, Caroline. And I think that's the appeal of the audiobook, is that there's also familiar voices. So Jennifer Beals is Daisy Jones. Benjamin Bratt is on there too. So it listens, when you listen to it, it's exactly like that. Another thing I loved about the book is the poetic song lyrics. I thought that they were just so mesmerizing.
Maybe I'll have to go. I don't usually, if I've read a book, I don't usually listen to the audiobook, but I think this could be a really nice complimentary experience to check that out.
I think so.
It's funny. That's a book, Caroline, after you had mentioned it originally, I was like, that sounds really good. Like the way you describe it, and Anna as well, it almost kind of sounds like Almost Famous. Of course, the I think it was 99 movie by Cameron Crowe. And so, yeah, it sounds really good. And yeah, I might have to download that audiobook now. Caroline, how about you? What have you been enjoying lately?
I recently read a book called Eskimo Pie, A Poetics of Inuit Identity by Norma Dunnings. And it was, the title grabbed me because I love these pop culture references, and I was really drawn into how she uses poetry and her writing to explore her own history, her family's history, and this idea of Inuit identity. And in some of her works in Eskimo Pie, she writes about what it means to be Inuit when you have lived in southern cities for all of your life. You've never lived in the north, and you don't speak the language, and your family has at times actively tried to hide this part of you. And she talks about how you can go through all of that and still have this identity, what it means to her, what it has meant over time. She writes about herself as a mother, as a daughter, as a child, as a student. I was really just so drawn in to her writing, and really really liked it. I've been talking about it with a lot of people recently, and I was so sad to miss her. She was giving a talk at the Ontario Library Association conference, which was last week, and I wasn't able to get in. It was a limited amount of people, but I am glad that for the people who did get in and had a chance to listen to her, and I will keep my eye out to see if maybe there will be other opportunities to hear her talk about her writing and her journey and everything on there. So we have a copy of that in the collection. It's called Eskimo Pie, A Poetics of Inuit Identity.
So I've always been curious to hear, regarding books like that. Hopefully this sounds right, but like, is the whole book essentially like one long poem, or is it kind of broken out into different, I guess not really chapters, but
Yeah.
different individual poems?
Yeah, the book is made up mostly of shorter poems that are usually about a page, maybe 2 pages, and the layout of how you kind of put a volume of poetry together like that is quite interesting. And I remember hearing well, it was back when we had in-person programs, so it would have been like over a year ago now. But some writers in one of the Capital City Press programs presentations talking about kind of how you put a book of poetry together and the flow and the balance and all of that. So in Eskimo Pie, they are a number of shorter poems, and then there are also a couple of prose pieces, and also in the title poem, it kind of compares and contrasts to the Wikipedia entry for Eskimo Pie, the product, and uses kind of some intertextuality about this idea of something that was created and advertised and sold as having this versus what it actually means to have been a part of that heritage tradition. So I found it very accessible to start reading, and then once I was reading, I just was drawn into her words and still thinking about it, still reflecting, want to search out her other writing as well.
That's cool.
Yeah, I hope we have it as an ebook.
I don't know if we do. I actually don't know if a lot of poetry gets turned into ebooks. We'll have to talk to our collections department
Yeah, that
to
sounds
see.
both epic and fascinating, Caroline. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Bryce, what have you enjoyed?
Yeah, so lately it's been interesting because I've with not as many new shows coming out, I've been able to go back and kind of start watching some shows that have been on my list to check out. It seems like forever, and now that I'm just burning through Netflix and everything else under the moon, but just recently I finally got a chance to start the HBO series Barry, starring Bill Hader. Have either of you watched that yet?
I haven't.
No, I have not, but I have heard great things about it, as I'm sure you had as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd heard awesome, great things about it, and yeah, so I just finished watching the first season of it. There's 2 seasons in total, and the good news is we actually have season 1 on DVD in our collection. So I was just looking at it this morning. There's no holds on it, so if you're listening to this, you can probably pick it up right away. But Barry, basically, it stars Bill Hader. Most people know him from Saturday Night Live, and he plays this disillusioned former Marine who ends up becoming, after he gets back from Afghanistan and Iraq, basically becomes a hitman. So there's a job that he has to do, and it takes him out to LA, where he discovers his love, believe it or not, for the performing arts, and decides to take an acting class, and decides, you know what? I don't want to be a hitman anymore. I want to become an actor. So he signs up for this acting class, and the acting class is led by the great Henry Winkler, aka the Fonz. And Henry Winkler plays this kind of like this actor who I don't know too much of his backstory yet, but it looks like he probably maybe had like a few minor TV hits, probably in the 70s and 80s. His character's name is Gene Cusono, and basically he steals every scene that he's in. The show is hilarious, but at the same time, though, I want to maybe say it's probably more so a dark comedy. While there is some stuff that's really funny, there's an episode I just watched the other night that got extremely dark really fast, but it's a really entertaining show. There's only about 8 episodes in the first season, and each episode's only like 30 minutes long. So for those for those cold weekends like we just had here, that is the absolute perfect show to throw on a cold Saturday or Sunday afternoon.
How many episodes did you binge?
I watched it over probably like 2 or 3 nights, but it's really good. I'm looking forward to starting season 2. But as I mentioned, season 1 is in our collection, and you can borrow it right now from us. So let's get to
We should say we're laughing because Anna is being joined by her own special guest for the recording.
Yes.
My little min pin Rocky hears something outside. There's nothing there, Rock. Look, there's Auntie Caroline and Uncle Bryce. You gotta chill out.
Hello. I think this is our first canine guest on the show.
Yes, that's correct. That this is in fact our first canine guest.
Yeah.
This is a historic moment, Rocky. And look, you're
That's
a
right.
part of it.
Rocky's a pioneer in podcasting.
That actually, I'm not sure if any of this dog talk will end up in the final episode, but if it does, I can say that on EPL's Instagram feed, EPL has an Instagram feed, and they've just launched a new feature, which is Pets of EPL, and it's a behind-the-scenes look at the people who work at the library, the animals that they love and care for in their lives. So make sure to check that out on Instagram.
Anna, I haven't seen it yet, but has Rocky made an appearance on Pets of EPL?
He hasn't yet. He is prepping for the photo shoot. We were planning to do a photo shoot with some of his EPL merch. But Caroline, Bryce has seen many photos of Rocky, but Caroline, watch out for that hashtag because Rocky will make his appearance.
I can't wait.
I have to say, Rocky probably has a better wardrobe than I do. So if you get a chance, check out Rocky on Instagram. All right. So EPL has brought in a lot of great speakers over the last few years, like John Douglas, Anthony Ray Hinton, Karina LeBlanc, and Neil Gaiman. Anna, why does EPL think it's important to have these presentations?
What a lineup you just mentioned, Bryce. Wow. It's amazing to have all those speakers here. EPL believes it's important to bring in thought leaders from a wide variety of industries and backgrounds. Our role is really to cultivate conversations, and it's an important way to continue to learn and to grow. Since the Forward Thinking Speakers launched in 2014, we've hosted over 30 speakers with, I think, about 15,000 attendees. And it's important to note that these events are also fundraisers for EPL.
Caroline, a little back trivia, I guess, if you will, about the Forward Thinking Speaker Series. Caroline,
yes,
you and I organized that very first Forward Thinking Speaker Series event back in 2014 with a Storm Chaser.
George Coronas. Yeah.
George Coronas, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I remember that very well. He had such a great energy for his talk. It was fantastic. He had pictures of himself hanging off the edge of a volcano. And I remember that the demand for it far outweighed the number of people we could fit in the theater. So since then, EPL has made efforts to find bigger and more accessible places so that more people can enjoy these presentations.
Was it in the Milner Theater?
Yeah, it was. And it was kind of interesting because we, at the time, this is before we charged for tickets, we're like, this is going to be a free event, but we're like, well, we'll open it up, we'll see how many people show up and everything. You didn't have to register or anything. So yeah, we probably, I don't know how many people we we had overflowing that theater. I'm pretty sure the fire marshal would have shut us down that day. But yeah, it was jam packed full of people. And then I think, Caroline, we had the audio playing out in the lobby area, didn't we?
Yeah, that's how we tried to offer something to the people who didn't get a chance to see him. So Anna, take us back to a year ago. As Bryce mentioned, we were just starting to hear about coronavirus. Around the middle of March is when EPL closed. What was it like making the decision to postpone the events?
Well, when we first suspended in-person classes and events in March of last year, it was mid-March, we initially had to postpone the Tanya Talaga event. At this point, it was sold out and the event was coming up. I think it was a couple of weeks, 10 days to 14 days away. And at the time, I didn't think that in-person events would be postponed for the remainder of the year. But as the uncertainty of the pandemic continued and public health measures continued to be in place, we decided to move all events to 2021 and also made the decision that most, if not all, of our events this year would be virtual.
And I'll just kind of jump in here with my own personal take on it. It's interesting because I also obviously work with Anna and kind of helping book a lot of these speakers. And it was interesting, looking at kind of like who we had lined up for 2020 and being like, okay, well, let's how far can we kind of push these presentations back? Can we just rebook them for maybe the fall of 2020 or even winter of 2020? And I remember all of that stuff was discussed, and it was kind of like, well, where are we going to be at? And I mean, we were all so naive back when the pandemic hit, even too, a lot of us ended up working from home, and it was like, we'll be back in 2 or 3 months. And unfortunately that just wasn't the case. So especially hosting a live event for 500 people or 1,000 people, now it just it kind of seems crazy to think that at the time we're like, we'll leave it 6 months and we'll see where we're at. And unfortunately it's still not quite back to where everybody hopes it would be by now.
Right. And I remember even when we talked about the venues, it was really the venues weren't open, and how far in advance would we have to book a venue? We were going to do it in person. If we had social distancing in place, what would that look like? So there were a lot of different scenarios that we discussed. Caroline and Bryce, of course, was part of these discussions. But I think in the end, we made the right decision to move them all to 2021. And look at them from a virtual presentation perspective.
Because that doesn't happen just overnight either. This idea of moving to a virtual or having these online presentations for people to, it's not just a matter of, okay, we'll do something else. Those require negotiation and figuring out timelines and platforms and everything. So a lot of work must have been happening behind the scenes on this.
Right. So it's Bryce talking to the agents. We're trying to figure out what days work for us here at EPL, what days work for the speakers, and also what does that platform look like? To your point, Caroline, is what does the live streaming look like where we can create this virtual environment that's just as engaging as it is in person? And everyone will get to see that at our first event next week with Irshad Manji.
As somebody who is a total homebody, I love that I can watch these events from my couch, basically. I can get in my PJs, sit on the couch, and watch these presentations. So I think everybody's really going to enjoy the virtual platform and kind of see how engaging it can actually be? So speaking of that, Anna, I know what the lineup is this year, but can you share with the listeners who I guess we're bringing in have these virtual events with this year?
So we've got 4 exciting speakers this year. The first one is Irshad Manji. She's the best-selling author of Don't Label Me, an incredible conversation for divided times. And her presentation will be next Thursday on February 18th. Irshad argues that when we allow ourselves to take offense, we miss out on the opportunity to learn from people with views that differ from our own. So in this talk, she's going to show guidelines and tips on how to have these conversations. On March 10th, we'll host Tanya Talaga. She's the author of the award-winning book, 7 Fallen Feathers. Tanya is known as a wonderful storyteller, and she'll share knowledge on Indigenous culture and history. On September 29th, we have Terry O'Reilly. So Terry is an incredible marketer and probably Canada's most famous ad man. He's going to present on marketing strategies and how to boost customer service. I think all organizations, public and private, can really benefit from his talk. And his podcast is one of my personal favorites, along with Overdue Finds, of course. And our 4th speaker this year is Michael Landsberg. His talk will be on November 3rd. Most people will recognize the name from Michael being the host of TSN's Off the Record. This is going to be a very personal keynote where he'll share his battle with mental illness and his goal on removing the stigma of having those conversations. So all of our speakers and all of the dates, it's available on our website at epl.ca/speaker series.
It's quite a lineup.
Don't you think?
I know, Anna, that you are super pumped up for Terry O'Reilly, aren't you?
I am. I love his podcast. I love his books. He's a great storyteller. So I'm really excited. So his talk is called Customer Service is Marketing. And I truly feel that all organizations will take some tips from his talk to implement into their own organization.
I think that talk is going to really resonate, even if you're not a small business owner. But I think that talk is really going to resonate with a lot of people anyway. So obviously, I'm a marketer as well, and just like you, Anna, I'm really excited for that talk. At the same time, I know we also get to interview him on the podcast here, Caroline. So I'm a little nervous because we've like this grandmaster of marketing and podcasting, and I definitely that's one I'm going to be nervous about later this year.
We'll have to go into some kind of training program for it.
I think so.
So that
Yeah,
we're on top of our game for that, because I am also looking forward to that. I am not a marketing fan, I would say. But if you listen to his podcast, he's just such a great storyteller, such an engaging speaker, and his the way that he talks is just perfect for, going and having those little bits of information that you can just drop into conversation and make it sound like you know what you're talking about, which I really like.
So unfortunately, we're running out of time, and I know you're really busy, but if you could bring in anyone to be a forward-thinking speaker, who would it be and why?
I have so many people on that list, Bryce and Caroline. But when I was thinking about this, there's one name that's been on my list for a few years, and that's Bryan Stevenson. He's a civil rights attorney whose life's work has been confronting bias against the poor and people of color in the U.S. justice system. He led the legal team that exonerated Anthony Ray Hinton after he spent 30 years on death row for a crime he didn't commit. You'll remember Mr. Hinton delivering that really powerful presentation in our 2019 speaker series, and he had the audience spellbound. And I think that bringing Bryan Stevenson would be just fascinating.
That talk with Anthony Ray Hinton, Caroline, I think you probably feel the same way that I do, but it's one of my personal favorite episodes that we've done here on the podcast. It was amazing to get to talk with him, and Obviously, I've been to pretty much like 95% of the speaker events that we do, and definitely the most powerful one we've ever hosted. And I think the only one that maybe has received multiple standing ovations. I want to say it was an incredible talk and something I'll never forget.
You could hear a pin drop in that room, I think, Bryce.
Yeah, it was incredible. Caroline, how about you? Who would you bring in?
There are so many great speakers, so many great people who would be wonderful to listen to. Maybe we could even interview them on the podcast. Maybe that was affecting me a little bit. But I went with Michelle Obama, and she was a her book Becoming was on EPL's most read, most borrowed, most listened to lists of 2020. So we know that there is an audience out there that is curious about her story, and I think that she would do a really great job of delivering a wonderful message. So, Michelle, if you're listening.
I like to think Michelle Obama is subscribed to Overdue Finds.
Oh, I don't. I would be too nervous if I thought that was actually real.
I did actually. I can honestly say I did have the pleasure of, because she was at Rogers Place a couple times, and I had the pleasure of going to see her talk the first time she was here, and she was interviewed by Cassie Campbell Pascal, who most people know from Hockey Night in Canada. Actually, does play-by-play, and they basically had a conversation on stage for I think 45 minutes to an hour, and it was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I would be in full support of us bringing in Michelle Obama. Mine, if I think I mentioned this maybe on one of our past episodes we had with Pilar maybe, but mine would be Dave Chappelle. And you're probably thinking like, Bryce, you're going to bring in a stand-up comedian? Yes, I am. And here's why. Dave Chappelle always has the most interesting things to say, and takes especially on like a lot of hot button issues, obviously, like sex, race, politics, everything. And especially if you watch some of his latest Netflix specials, I think there was like 2 or 3 that came out last year. One came out after the unfortunate death of George Floyd, and some of the stuff that happened last year. So he's got a really interesting take on a lot of hot button issues, and to me, he's everything that the Forward Thinking Speaker Series is about. Of course, he's going to throw in some hilarious jokes in there. It would be really good. And Anna, I think we'd have to get like Rogers Place for that one.
I think so too. I think that one would be a major headliner if you're able to get Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
I never thought of him as a name to put on my list, Bryce, but that's actually a great idea.
We can talk about that off air maybe for 2022, can't we?
Yeah. We've got those on our list, and Michelle Obama has been on the list before. I think we've tried.
Oh, I'm sure she's quite busy.
Oh, we tried. Yeah, I know. Maybe not anymore. Maybe she's kind of, feeling a little bit more chill now that Biden is in office. So perhaps she has time now. Maybe they're going to do a tour or something. Her and Barack.
Because she's got her book, he's got his new book. This could be the perfect time.
Why don't we do a power couple series for Forward Thinking Speaker Series?
I like it.
Then we could have Michelle and Barack.
Bill and Melinda Gates could come in too.
Exactly. We've got all these power couples.
I like this idea.
So Anna, thank you so much for joining us today. As you mentioned, of course, we have our event with Earshad coming up next week. But can you obviously after this, we're going to be sharing our interview with Tanya Talaga. But can you remind everyone where they can go to get tickets for that event?
So Tanya Talaga, you can learn more about her event. The date is on March 10th, and tickets will be available at epl.ca/speaker series.
But as we talked about at the top of the show, we had a chance to chat with Tanya Talaga last March before her previously scheduled event with us that was going to take place in April of 2020. So, Caroline, it's funny because I wasn't sure we would ever get to share this interview, and I'm so glad we do get to share it today.
I had started thinking of it as like Overdue Finds lost episode, and I'm glad that it's not going to be.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because we actually have a couple episodes that I would consider to be lost episodes, where we have recorded interviews, but I'm like, I want to save it until this is happening, and I'm waiting for stuff to be released, movie and TV wise. We have a really good SCTV interview that I can't wait to share, hopefully sometime this year. But yeah, it's always good to kind of share these interviews, and especially this one here that you're about to hear with Tanya Talaga. So a couple things before you listen to it. The interview is actually really short. We did have a chance to chat with her about not only her talk with us coming up, but her book as well, called Seven Fallen Feathers, which I was aware of before we chatted with her, Caroline, and I read it obviously in preparation and was absolutely blown away. It's I think, and I mentioned this in the interview that you're about to hear, but I think it's one of those books that I think almost every Canadian should read. It's that important.
Absolutely, and I think that her book and the stories that she's telling do an excellent job of sharing how history isn't past. Things are still occurring, things are still happening. This idea of Indigenous kids having to leave home to get education and what that then turns into is not something that is over and done with. It's something that's happening today. And so when she talks about the stories that she's telling, the families that she got to know, all of that, I think she just does such a wonderful job at shining a light on this. And it, as you say, it's a story that everyone should read and know and be familiar with.
Mm-hmm. And we touch on kind of stuff about students reading her book in this interview. And it's interesting because when you hear this interview, a couple things. One, Tanya, she's extremely busy. So our interview with her is quite short, but she's also on her cell phone with it. So it does sound obviously a little bit different than what you might normally hear when we interview other people on this show. And also, too, we make mention of obviously the event that was supposed to take place in April of 2020. So you hear like a different date for the event, and you're also going to hear a reference to Lillian Osborne High School, because that's where the event was originally supposed to take place. So there'll be a few little things that might sound a little bit off with this one, but I still think it's one of my favorite interviews that we've done so far, Caroline, and I think people will enjoy not only this interview we have with her, but especially her talk coming up with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So without further ado, we present to you our interview with Tanya Talaga, recorded in March of 2020. I've spoken to many different groups all over the country. What's your favorite part about traveling around Canada and doing these type of speaking events?
I love meeting new people, especially traveling to Western Canada and meeting new communities and many people from First Nations communities that I didn't know before, and communities that I didn't know much about. I've been spending a lot of time in Alberta lately, just this past year, and during that time I've gotten to know a little bit more about the Blackfoot and Stoney Nakoda people, and it's been great. I'm learning a lot.
What can people expect from your presentation with us, which is called All Our Relations, Finding the Path Forward?
It's going to be about Canada's true history, what we have gone through in this nation for the past 150 years as Indigenous people, colonization, fact that we still are fighting for basic human rights. All of those things are going to be part of my talk when I'm in Alberta.
So I want to talk a little bit about Seven Fallen Feathers. I just recently read it, and it was incredible. And but at the same time, it is a very hard book to read, and I mean that in a good way. Especially as we learn more and more about students' experiences before and after their deaths. Was there ever a moment in your research or your writing that I guess really stunned or surprised you?
It all does, all of it. I wish I didn't have to write Seven Fallen Feathers, but it is a book that I did have to write, sadly, because of the fact that our kids are dying to get a high school education, and that shouldn't be the case for any child, no matter where they live or what color their skin is, but it is for our children.
So was it difficult to get access to the families? And what was it like approaching them and saying that you were going to be writing about their loved ones?
I had been writing about the kids and what was happening at Thunder Bay for several years before I started to write the book. So I knew how to get a hold of the families beforehand. And I had a lot of help with reaching people in community from community members themselves. So in that way, I was really lucky. And I always say that many hands wrote this book with me. It wasn't just myself writing the book. I went out of my way to make sure that we checked the chapters of the book with the family members that we spoke to. So it was important to me that we honor the kids.
In Seven Fallen Feathers, during the same time that the students went missing, you note that this was also the time of the residential school's apology from the Prime Minister, the beginning of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Jordan's principle, and Shannon's dream. But bureaucratic inertia, combined with the trappings of history, failed to turn these promising political words into action. What will it take to see that action?
Yeah, sadly, that's still the case.
Yeah.
So we still need to get political will in this country, find political will in this country in order to move forward. And I don't know what's going to take to get us there. Attitudes of Canadians are changing, but we're still seeing the need for change. I mean, when you look at the facts of what's been going on in Wet'suwet'en and the rail blockades across Canada, we still have issues of land and title rights. We still have issues as to whether or not the Canadian government is actually upholding their own laws. There's a lot that needs to be done. For the last 150 years, we haven't had basic human rights in so many ways for a lot of our people. So until we achieve that, we're actually not going to see a better Canada, a fairer Canada. And so how do we get there? How do we get to that place? It means a lot more than just hugs, Reconciliation isn't a great word. Reconciliation means the coming together of two equal parts. But as I've outlined, we don't have two equal people here, Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. Indigenous people have always been treated as less than. So you can't have reconciliation when you've got unequal parts coming together. I prefer to think of it more as rebuilding. We need to rebuild relationship with Indigenous people in this country.
In 2018, you delivered the Cbc Massey Lectures, which were later published as All Our Relations. There were lecture events in Halifax, Vancouver, Saskatoon, and Toronto, but the first one was held in Thunder Bay. What was that experience like for you?
It was amazing, It was one of the most important nights of my life. We had no idea how it was going to go, if was going to be something that people were going to come to, or if this was something that was going to, people were going to protest it. We just really had no idea what would happen. And we were absolutely thrilled what did happen, and that was everybody came. A lot of people came, I should say. The theater sat 1,500 people, but 1,900 people came.
Wow.
And it was really quite a sight. The Anishinaabe Nation and Fort William First Nation helped me put the lecture on in Thunder Bay, and they actually were given the ticket sales by the CBC, and Nan said, no, actually, we don't want the ticket sales. What we're going to do is throw open the doors and make this a community-free event. And so that's what happened, and the community came out.
That's fantastic, and love hearing that. How obviously your story or the book and obviously your lecture resonated with so many people, and it is such an important topic. And speaking of that, your event with us here in Edmonton, we're actually going to be it's going to be at Lillian Osborne High School, and we hope to do kind of some sort of chat with some of the students before your event. And when I chatted with you on the phone previously, you mentioned that some school boards in Canada have included Seven Fallen Feathers as part of their high school curriculum. What is the significance of that to you?
It's amazing, it harkens back to what I was saying earlier about honoring the lives of the kids, and by Canadian schools teaching the stories of the Seven Fallen Feathers, they are honoring the lives of those children, and they are making sure that we educate a generation of Canadians that know the true history of this country and see what's still happening in this country and the inequities that our kids face. This is so important, and if Seven Fallen Feathers can help educate the next generation of Canadians, I think it's incredible.
No, I totally agree. I mentioned this on a previous episode of our podcast where I grew up here in Alberta during the 80s and 90s, and I don't recall ever hearing really about residential schools until I think was in college maybe, or a little bit older. Like, we just weren't taught about, that terrible part of our history in school. Like, we learned about World War II and, some stuff over in Europe, but that was really it. So when I heard that kids were actually reading this book as part of their curriculum, I thought that was incredible.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you had been writing about the students and the family and the reality that was occurring years before the book was published. In the last few years, we've seen newspapers across the country end publication, reduce the number of issues, lay off staff. Where do you think journalism in Canada is headed?
Well, it's a tough question. Doesn't look good, does it? And I think that I'd love to see more Indigenous journalists hired, editors, decision makers, people that are managing editors, executive producers. It's important to get our voices heard and out there, and in positions of power as well as on the street reporting. Journalism is going through a crisis, though. We're seeing fewer publications. We are seeing a concentration of media, and when that happens, sadly, we don't see a growth of Indigenous people in the media, unless you look at our own media sources. And there are plenty of Indigenous journalists working for their own publications, or for smaller magazines, or you can even look at APTN as a news source, which is quite incredible, and it's full of Indigenous people, and they have an online service as well. There is hope, but it's sad to see the shrinking news business, that's for sure, because that doesn't help anybody in the long term.
Yeah. Would you have like a piece of advice for any students right now going to school who are maybe thinking about getting into journalism?
I always think that it's worth going into journalism. You get paid to be a storyteller, you get to meet people, you get to talk to people, present their stories out there, and skills that you learn in journalism school are transferable to so many things. Learning how to be a good communicator is so important, and you can take those skills in so many directions.
Now, I know that when you were at university, you worked at the Strand at Victoria College. And as another Victoria College graduate, I need to ask, do you have any favorite memories of Vic?
Oh, that's so cool. You went to Vic too?
I did. I lived at Annesley for 4 years.
Oh, cool. I lived at Margad Hall for a year. I will always remember my time at Victoria College, at the student newspaper, working really hard at the Strand till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, on production nights every other week because we came out twice a month. And I remember those were the old days of light boards and hot wax and line tape, very different from the digital world of today. And it was really cool to be part of a student newspaper, and I learned that craft at Vic, and I took it with me, and I'm still doing it.
Oh, that's great.
So we have one last question for you, because I know you're extremely busy, but we always ask this of all of our guests on the show because, of course, we're a library podcast. Do you have a recent book, movie, TV show, or even album that you could recommend to our listeners to check out?
I would say, well, the last book that I read in its entirety was Jesse Thistle's From the Ashes. I would highly recommend it. It's a book about a Métis and Cree man and his journey, his life story. It's really quite remarkable. Jesse was homeless for a time, was in jail, and now he's a professor at York University, and he teaches on Métis culture, and he's an inspiration. I would urge everyone to read it.
And that was From the Ashes?
Yeah, From the Ashes, Jesse Thistleton.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you taking this call with us. And I know Caroline and myself and everybody else here in Edmonton are extremely excited to be hosting you on April the 22nd, and we're really looking forward to you joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it too. Love Edmonton. Great.
Thanks, Tanya. Caroline, that was a great interview, and it was so nice of Tanya Talaga to give us some of her time to get to chat with us. I kind of joked about this at the top of the show, where this was really like we recorded this like a week before just everything went into total shutdown, COVID wise. So it's interesting to go back and listen to that interview with her and talk about an event that unfortunately never happened, but we are still so excited that she's at least doing a virtual event with us. And the nice thing about these virtual events is that while our previous event was sold out, having a virtual event allows us to have a lot more people can hear Tanya's story and her message.
Yeah, I think that there are opportunities that weren't there a year ago. I think we've all learned different elements of hosting and planning and throwing virtual events and having in person and all of this. And I just was really happy. As I said before the interview, I was a little nervous that no one would hear our interview with her, and that we wouldn't be able to have this event. And so I'm glad that it has worked to come back together in 2021 and have this event, because I'm just so looking forward to it. And I think everyone will have the same experience that we had talking with her, even if they're just watching her.
Mm-hmm. There is a part in the interview when I was going back and listening to it the other week that kind of I was kind of questioning what I had mentioned to her. And there was a part in there where I said how, growing up, we didn't learn about residential schools in school. And it's interesting because I was in high school in the mid to late 90s, and it's horrible to think about now, but there was still residential schools back then, like not that long ago in the 90s. So there's a reason why, I unfortunately did not learn about that stuff, I imagine, growing up. But the positive thing now, as we heard from that talk, high school students, and I imagine junior high students as well, they're learning about residential schools now, and that unfortunate but part of our history. But it's worth it's worth kind of sharing those details with students, so they know about this tragedy that took place.
One of the things that she talks about and touches on in the interview is that this is being read by students in schools, and having that story, having different stories, having diverse, having representative accounts of history, of cultural studies, English, all of these things. I think that's so important for students to see themselves reflected in the curriculum that she's talking about. And another part of the interview that really stuck out to me was we had the chance to talk to her a little bit about journalism and the future of journalism and what this, and now in this context, listening to her really reminded me of what Irshad Manji was saying in her interview with us about how when journalism moves behind a paywall, that can really have an effect on people and on the stories that people are exposed to. So there are some really interesting threads, I think, intertwining some of these speakers that we have that wasn't necessarily the plan, but now that this is the order that we're listening to them in, these are kind of emerging.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be a really interesting next few weeks here. Obviously, when you hear this episode, in 4 or 5 days after this episode's release, we'll be hosting Irshad, and then another 3 weeks or so, we'll be hosting Tanya Talaga on March 10th. So there's going to be some really interesting talks coming up, and I'm so happy after not being able to host these events in over a year since our last one, that we can start bringing back these speakers again. So it's really important talks, and we hope everyone will join us.
So Bryce, where can people go to find out more information about these talks and the other ones we have coming up this year?
Absolutely. So you can visit us on epl.ca/speaker series. You can go there, and there's links to the tickets to both Irshad Manji's talk and Tanya Talaga's talk. Those links will take you to Eventbrite, where you can purchase tickets. You can also just go to eventbrite.ca and search for the events there and secure your tickets.
Great. So before we wrap up, can you let our listeners know what is coming up on our next episode, which will be released on Friday, February 26th?
Caroline, this is we're getting to that time of the year. This is going to be one of my, I think, favorite episodes of the year. So sharpen your pencils and get your brackets ready, because it's time for us to bring back Overdue Finds March Madness. And on the next episode, we're going to be sharing the theme and who we've got picked to win this year's tournament. This is going to be a good one, Caroline. We had a meeting last Friday to kind of narrow down some names. Even before we recorded today, we were shooting some notes back to each other, kind of finalizing a few names. We've got, it's going to be really interesting this year. And I think this is going to be a year where I don't want to spoil what the theme is now, but it's going to be really polarizing, because I know there's I'm losing sleep, because I know there's people that should probably be in this tournament that won't be. And it's just because there's so many great other titles to include. So I don't know how you're feeling about how this year's bracket's coming up, but I think this one's going to have a lot of people talking.
I think so. The engagement on social media, we'll talk more about this on the episode, but you'll be able to vote on Twitter, on Facebook, and I believe
It'll be Instagram for the first time this year. Yeah.
So how will that change things?
And I can't wait to talk about this on the next episode, but every year there's like one pick that just kind of like sneaks through that we didn't think was going to maybe go very far, and it ends up kind of becoming like the darling of the tournament. So I can't wait.
I'm really looking forward to it. And the only minor disappointment is that we're still recording at a distance. So we're not yet in the studio. We don't have our sound effects board. The air horn just isn't ready yet. But other than that, it's going to be a great event.
It really will.
Yeah. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show so that you get all of our new episodes. Also, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and please tell a friend about the show.
We got that awesome note earlier in the show that we shared with you from our coworker Tammy, who really enjoyed our It's Not on Netflix episode. So we love hearing from listeners. So don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes, including our Overdue Finds picks and the link to our upcoming Forward Thinking Speaker Series events. If you'd like to reach us, you can reach us on Twitter at epl.ca or email us at podcast@epl.ca. Caroline and I both get those emails. And don't forget that you can share your thoughts about the show with us on Twitter by using the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.